everyone, and welcome to Thorough Newspaper Analysis brought to you by Losico. So, today, as already mentioned, we will be discussing the newspaper analysis for 25th and 26th October, that is for Sunday and today as well. So this is the first article, the chronic battle with malnutrition. This is from the yesterday's The Hindu. So this talks about the fight against malnutrition that India has been taking up, and what are the basic reasons behind it, and what are the potential steps that we can take in this direction. Second, reinventing non-alignment. This is from today's newspaper, The Indian Express, which talks about that in this time, as like we have already discussed much about non-alignment and how India should not be really choosing between US or China or any other superpower for that matter. But today's article has some very good points, so we'll discuss them as well in detail. And thirdly, let's not waste a crisis, which is again from the Indian Express, and this talks about the farm bills. But the reason we have taken up this article today is that it gives a very new angle to the Punjab farm bills that have been passed in contradiction to the Parliament's farm bills, and what will be the negative consequences of such bills has been discussed in this article. Please keep a note that today there was no edition given out for the Hindu on the account of Dashera, so that is why we'll be discussing yesterday's The Hindu and today's Indian Express as well. Before that, let's have a discussion and let's have a look at the Law Seeker courses that we have for you. So if you're also preparing for Judicial Services exam, you can definitely have a look at the course that we have for you. The link is there in the description box, and you can download free study material from the landing page as well. Now we have various other courses like for CLAT, SEBI, All India Bar Exam, etc. You can view them as well. With this, let's see that what is the multiple choice question for the day. Hindu growth rate refers to, so this was actually in today's newspaper only. So what do you mean by the Hindu growth rate? Firstly, high growth of GDP. Second, slow growth of GDP. Third, growth of services sector. Or fourth, growth of employment rate. So you can write down the answer in the comment section below. This is the descriptive question for the day. Discuss the steps that should be taken in India to fight against the increasing levels of malnutrition. Now, since the Global Hunger Index report is also out now, and India has not really been doing well in this report, so this is a very current issue, and even at the national levels also we are fighting malnutrition. So this is a really current issue, and a very potential question can come from this. So we should keep a check out on that. With this, let's start with the first article, which talks about malnutrition in India. So as we all know, we have been discussing many a times now that India has been ranked 94th. That is even lower than Bangladesh and Pakistan and even Nepal on the 2020 Global Hunger Index out of 107 nations. So this rank is obviously not something to be celebrate about, and this is a really concern-worthy rank that India has gotten in this GHI 2020. And according to this Global Hunger Index, and also according to the World Food Programme, which has also been given the Nobel Prize for Peace this year, 690 million undernourished people are there in the whole world, and there are 144 million children that are suffering from stunting, and 47 million are suffering from wasting. Now, before we understand that what do we really mean by stunting, wasting, and such related terms that are there in the studies of malnutrition, today's article offers such a plethora of facts that I would really recommend you, all of you, to just jot down these facts, and like you don't have to memorize each one of them, but just take those facts which you think can be put up in most of the questions. These are the facts that make your answer more authentic and substantiate your viewpoint, and be it in the any mains answer or be it in the essay as well, these facts are very crucial to be jotted down. So these things, like according to the Global Hunger Index there are 690 million, according to the World Food Programme there are 690 million undernourished people all around the world, and about the number of children who are stunted or wasted, so that you should know about it. Now, before we get deep into today's discussion, we need to understand first as to what do we mean by stunting and wasting in children. Basically, stunting means that when a child, according to his age, has very less height. So many times you might have seen that due to malnutrition, people or children, they're not able to grow properly into their height as compared to their age. Like for example, a child of 8 to 9 years must be of some particular height, but obviously due to the this chronic in a way this malnutrition, what happens is that that child is not able to grow properly into height, and that results into stunting. Now, by wasting, we mean that a child, his weight according to his height is not appropriate. Like for example, a child's height is, for example, 4 feet, and his weight should be ideally around, for example, let's say it should be 35 to 40 kgs, for example. But due to the chronic hunger, which means now there are two different things of acute hunger and chronic hunger. Now, by chronic hunger means that from long time period it was happening. So this is something that happens, wasting, that is low weight as per the height, happens due to what we know as the acute hunger, and stunting happens due to the chronic hunger, as in for when for a very prolonged period children are not able to get nutritious food, so their height actually cripples down. And wasting means that according to their height, their weight is not appropriate. So these are two forms of the most common forms of malnutrition that we see in the world. Then we should also know that which actually agency or from where does the global hunger index come up. Basically, it is an annual peer-reviewed publication by Concern Worldwide and World Hunger Health. So these two things, these two names should be kept in mind, because a prelims question can definitely come up as to who releases the global hunger index. Then we have tracks, it basically tracks hunger at global, regional, and national level. So these are the entire things, if they calculate inadequate food supply, child mortality, and child undernutrition, under which we have wasting and stunting. So these are the main three dimensions and total four indicators that actually are the basis of the basic parameters of the global hunger index. Now we already have like discussed at length that what has been the India's performance. So India falls in serious category now, which is not really a very good news for us. And even in the BRICS nations, India is the one that is at the last position, and the levels of malnutrition are worst in as compared to other BRICS nations. And here, please don't get confused that China and Brazil have scored less and India has scored more, so India must be performing better. In this situation, according to the parameters of the Global Hunger Index, the country that scores more is supposed to have performed even worse. So, like India has scored 38 point, has scored this year 27.2, which is still a better improvement from our previous levels, but still we are into the serious category. And countries like China and Brazil have scored less than 5, and that is why they have a better position or a better rank in this index. And then if you talk about the overall undernourishment, then 14% of the population of India does not get enough calories. And though it has improved from 20% in 2005 to 7, but still it is very concern worthy. Then child mortality rate is also very high in India. Stunting and wasting rates are also very high. And in fact, India has the highest rate of the wasted children in the world. So this is something which is very something very this is, please mind, this is 17.3. This is not 7.3. So please keep it in mind. Malnutrition in India. Then again, let's see that what are the causes. Now, here more than facts. Now, since we've already discussed the facts, you can definitely jot them down. We need to understand that what are the causes for such high levels of stunting and wasting in India. So poor state of maternal health, obviously, because if the mother is not healthy, how can you really expect that the child would be healthy and would be nourished well? So the poor maternal health is also one of the reasons, as 42% of adolescent girls in India have low body BMI, which is the body mass index, and 54% women in India have anemia, that is lack of iron and also lack of hemoglobin in the body. Then what needs to be done here needs to be seen that, and here also they should be given better access to contraception, contraceptive pills, etc., so that they do not get pregnant into very early years of their marriage, and should also not be married at a very early a very early age, first of all. So what needs to be done is improvement in access to food security, sanitation, housing, and access to healthcare. And then every kind of household deprivation making women lives difficult should be dealt with. So this is a very important article, and we should really understand the causes behind malnutrition, as because just the lack of good nutrition is not the reason behind malnutrition, but also sanitation. Like, for example, diseases like diarrhea that occur due to unhealthy or unhygienic conditions or atmosphere around us. So just imagine that children who are already very weak and their immune system is just not as good as any child should have the immune system to be. So they suffer from such diseases, and which further deteriorate their health. So in the long run, these sanitation related problems, like due to the open defecation also, this is again an issue. And then for proper housing, cleanliness, and other healthcare facilities should also be readily available. With this, let's discuss the second article for the day, which talks about the US, China, and India's non alignment. Now, as we know, that after India had gotten its independence, so it was given a choice either to join any of the two major blocs. So one was from the side of USSR, the Soviet Union, and the other was the USA bloc. But India, on the contrary, it actually did not choose any of these blocs, and it came up with the idea of being non-aligned to any such powers and to maintain its own sovereignty. This was one of the decisions that were highly, to say, celebrated and highly, emphasized upon, and people were really happy about, that it is the best way perhaps to save the newly gotten independence, and only this would be the way that we would be able to celebrate and uphold our sovereignty in the world order. Now let's see that why this entire issue is in news. Firstly, the face-off between India and China in Ladakh and the plans for annexation of West Bank by Israel have brought matter of global power dynamics into the forefront. We have discussed about both of them in detail, and the rise of China has led to trade war between China and US. Now, the only country that we see here common is India. So, be it the China-India border issue or the US-China issue, so here we see that one country that has maybe, the one, why we call India as the swing power, because China wants India to be not on its own side, whereas US, to curb the growing rate of China or the growth of China, wants India to be on its own side. So there are like different intentions and also different contentions coming from both the countries, and that is why it is supposed many times from India that India would be taking the side of any of the one nations. Though there has been like there have been some references where it has been seen that India in some scenarios has shown inclination towards greater inclination towards the USA, but still India upholds its non-alignment treaty or non-alignment idea, and that is why India should not be really choosing between any nation, because obviously if we are a sovereign country, we should not be having a choice as such to choose from from all just one or two things to choose. We are a sovereign country and we should have complete freedom to deal with any nation the way we want to. So in past, India refused to join the Cold War camps, as we just discussed. That India didn't either choose the USSR bloc and not even the USA bloc, and it adopted the non-alignment, so which championed the cause of colonized regions and new decolonized parts of the world, just like India was. And now the foreign policy has tilted towards US, and if we also talk about the other scenario, that also neoliberals. So this has been, seen a bigger shift from the side of India, and that is why some people are saying that India is not really sticking properly with its non-alignment treaty, and it is actually showing inclination towards the US. But now let's see that what actually should India do. India should reject both the unipolarity of 1990s and the current bipolarity dominated by US and China. So such a nice contention has been given by the author here, that just the way we, like after the 1990s, when the Cold War had barely just ended, and during the 1990s the USSR or the Soviet Union started to disintegrate, that is to break into pieces. And as we know that it was earlier, it was from this Soviet Union bloc that Russia actually came out, and other countries like Ukraine, Croatia, and all, they actually broke from the USSR. Now, in such a scenario, India still did not, and at this time, USA had become the unipolar or the one unilateral power of the global order. But India still did not choose to stick completely towards US's side, and it maintained its sovereignty and independence. And then the author says that even in the current scenario, when we are seeing a bipolar world, like one world order is towards the USA and the other is towards the China, so India should again not be bowing down towards any bipolarity, and it should still uphold its own sovereignty, just like the way it did during the time of 1990s. Then it should live up to its independent non-aligned credentials till the way we have been doing till date, and play a constructive role in evolving a more inclusive, multipolar, and just world order. Now, since India has always had this image that India has always taken up a stand for the unrepresented or underrepresented nations of the world, and even the author says that now, since we have gotten at least the seat of non-permanent member of the United Nations Security Council. So India should definitely use this opportunity to bring forward the contentions or the interests of the unrepresented or underrepresented nations in the UN, and also speak for the marginalized people and populations of the world in order to show its leadership skills and to show that how much concern does India really have for other nations that are not really well represented in the United Nations. And then finally, it should strive to make the world more inclusive, just, and sensitive to the environment. So these are really important, and these are the 5 principles of non-alignment. You can go through them, and these were the founding fathers. Basically, it is like the head of this can be said Sri Jawaharlal Nehru, and there were others like Ahmad Sukarno, Joseph Broz Tito, Kwame Ruruma, if I'm pronouncing that right. This was from Ghana. He was from Ghana, and Abdel Nasser from Egypt. So these were many people from all around the world who came together. And from India, we had Sri Jawaharlal Nehru in this regard to give India non-aligned movement. With this, let's discuss the final article for the day, which talks about the agro-marketing reforms. Now, just like day before yesterday, we discussed that Punjab State Legislative Assembly has passed 3 bills in contradiction to the 4 farm bills that were recently passed by the Parliament of India. And now, since the bills have been passed and they are actually in contravention with the parliamentary bill, so they will have to have assent from the president. Let's see if at all the assent is given or not. But here the author has been discussing that such bills like the way Punjab has passed, and also it is expected that states like Rajasthan and Chhattisgarh would also be moving with similar bills in the near future. So he actually says that these bills, basically, if they are given the assent of the president and become the act, they have a very high potential of bringing India back to 50 years the way we were in the times of 1970s, and the all growth in the agricultural sectors and the agri-market produce systems we had made would actually be shut down totally, and thus such bills should not be allowed, as they actually hamper the very ideal or the very purpose of freeing up the agricultural market. So the fallacy that has been pointed out in the Punjab bills is that it has provided that the government would be procuring 95% of wheat and paddy. Basically, it said that it would be not allowing even the private people to buy any produce which is below the MSP, and thus if they do it, it would be a punishable offense for 3 years in prison and also a hefty fine. But the fallacy here is that in Punjab, 95% of wheat and paddy is already brought by Food Corporation of India, and they have also made this provision only for wheat and paddy and not for any other produce like maize and other things that are made in Punjab, that are produced in Punjab. Now, this is something that like if we speak theoretically, it sounds so good that the government seems so concerned that it is actually making sure that even the private people do not buy any like the wheat and rice below the MSP. But ideally, this is of no use because 95% of the wheat and paddy is already brought by, or it is bought by the Food Corporation of India. So where are the private players in this regard? So they have given the protection to wheat and paddy, which didn't even need protection. So this is something, again, something that we are putting down the role of private sector in agriculture, and the author says that this would be something that would again bring us back to the license Raj. Now, by license Raj, we mean that at the time of independence, because obviously India was struggling very hard to boost its industry and to make itself secure in the terms of food, that is agriculture. So it made sure that the role of private people or the private companies or investors was very limited, and the government had the control of almost everything in the country, so that a socialist approach could be favored because the people were in very, very bad condition after the independence of the country. In such a scenario, license system was brought into the use. So where it happened that wherever a private individual or a private person had to get into the production or manufacturing process of anything, or had to open up any industrial setup, he had to avail a license from the government for doing so. And even if he wanted to venture into any new product, any new kind of manufacturing, or even would wanted to expand its manufacturing output, then also the license had to be gained from the government. That later on, it actually was highly misused by the superpowers or the powerful industrialists of the country, because they made sure that the newer industrialists were not given licenses in order to curb any competition that might be be given to their products. And this actually came to be as the license Raj, which was highly criticized, and finally it was done away with in 1991. So this is something the author says that this is a one situation where we might get back to license Raj, wherein we are not allowing again the private individuals and the private sector to venture into this area of agriculture, due to which we might create a monopoly which is not very healthy for the society and also for the economy. And then we know we have just discussed as to what the license Raj was. This was a part of the history of the agri-marketing reforms. And from 1991 reforms under Prime Minister P.V. Narasimha Rao, where at this time Dr. Manmohan Singh was the Finance Minister of India, and we had the world famous LPG reforms, which were the liberalization, privatization, and globalization reforms. And that actually help us to do away or to get rid of the Hindu rate of growth. So this was something which was not really very appreciated, and Hindu rate of growth referred to a growth rate of GDP which was not exceeding 3.5% per annum, which was very, very minimal. And that is why after the 1991 reforms, by 2000 itself, India had a GDP of 7% per annum, which was even the double of Hindu rate of growth of 1970s and socialist era. Now, this needs to be understood as to why do we actually call it as the Hindu rate of growth. Earlier, though later it was criticized for the name given as Hindu, and it was just simply, called as by some other names, but it was shunned by the usage of Hindu rate of growth. So basically, it was coined to refer to the phenomena of sluggishness in growth in the rate of Indian economy, which was approximately only 3.5% per annum. The term actually owes to Professor Raj Krishna, who was a member of the Planning Commission, who captured popular imagination and was used to synonymously to describe inadequacy of India's growth performance. So, however, later on this term lost its relevance and appeal as economic reforms and liberalization in India since 1990s took over and the growth rate increased in India. So basically, it was called to be as Hindu rate growth because some people believe that this is the ideology wherein people are way too satisfied with whatever they have, and thus they do not want to venture into new things or work for new things or for the growth of the GDP, and that is why it was commonly known as the Hindu rate of growth or a Hindu growth rate. So this was later on known, just nowadays we don't really use this term because obviously we now have a very liberal economy. Then 2003, under Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee, a model act on agri-marketing was regulated to the states, and the model did not go far as the NDA government lost in 2004, and then finally the UPA government, that is the Congress, came into power. Then from 2004 to 14, under the Prime Ministership of Manmohan Singh, it did not pursue any major agri-marketing reforms, but still it turned quite socialist, wherein we had the National Food Security Act 2013, according to which we had the public distribution system more into concrete manner, wherein 5 kg wheat and rice were given to 67% of population at rupees 2 or 3 per kg. So this is the glance at the National Food Security Act, and from 2014 onwards, under Prime Minister Narendra Modi, there had been a setup of high-level committee under Shanta Kumar to restructure grain management system, and also it suggested that cash transfer should take place in the public distribution system, and the overhauling or reimagining of the Food Corporation of India's operations should be taken up in India. And then finally, in the COVID-19 scenario, we have again had an opportunity for the recent reforms that have actually occurred. So this is the entire story of the agri-market reforms that took place since the independence till the date. And we should definitely have a very crisp idea about it as to what major growth or what major steps were taken from time to time to actually bring in the reforms in the agri market. And even Shanta Kumar committee had recommended that we should have freer markets, that is the agri market should be freed up from over control of the government. And this actually, the farm bills they are now trying to do the same act. Now let's see that what do we have for news in flash today. Prime Minister inaugurates 3 Gujarat projects. This is from yesterday's newspaper, The Hindu. So one each related to farmers' welfare, healthcare, and tourism. So for farmers' welfare, we have the Kisan Suryodaya Yojana for providing daytime electricity for irrigation and farming. For healthcare, it's the Pediatric Heart Hospital at UN Mehta Institute of Cardiology and Research Center, Ahmedabad. And for tourism development, we have a 2.3 kilometer long ropeway project on Mount Girnar, which is in the Junagadh city. So these should be kept in mind, specifically the Kisan Suryodaya Yojana as well. Secondly, precious sample So asteroid Bennu. So this can be very much a potential question of prelims as to Bennu was seen in news. What actually is it? So Bennu is actually name of an asteroid, and NASA's OSIRIS-REx spacecraft sent to asteroid Bennu, which is actually located over 200 million miles away from Earth, for collecting rocks and dust samples, has collected far more samples than anticipated, jamming the door. So basically, these samples are being collected to study the entire evolution of the universe, the formation of the planets, and so on and so forth. So Bennu basically was discovered by NASA, which was funded by Lincoln Near Earth Asteroid Research Team, which is also known as LINEAR, in 1999, and it was named after an Egyptian deity. So this was all for today. We hope it was a good session for you. Stay tuned with LawSikho for such more sessions to come. Thank you so much.